her head, what a month she's had. Yeah, what a month she's had. It's astonishing, isn't it?
Is it significant that she sat directly next to Kwasi Kwarteng?
I think the pair of them really are in lockstep. There were some suggestions last week that he might be going to get the sack. I can't see anywhere in which that would happen because the two of them have come up with these policies together. They are ideologically together. They have been friends for many years. They both came in 2010, of course.
Well, I understand they put this policy suggestion together many years before they were even MPs, didn't they, when they were working with think tanks?
Yes, absolutely. And they believe very passionately that this is the right way forward. So I think that's why, despite all the criticism, despite the turbulence in the market, despite the way it has gone, we're just looking at the pictures to see what's happening in the hall, despite the way it has gone down around the country so far, they are not for turning. They are convinced that this is temporary. And of course, in terms of the pound dropped very significantly, didn't it? And then it did rebound. So who knows? They realise they're in this for the long game. They realise these changes aren't going to happen overnight. But at the same time, they do have to have a general election in the next 2 years, or just over 2 years. They can create the conditions for growth, but generating that growth.
The President of the National Conservative Association is coming on stage now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Conservative members and friends, I am Fleur Butler, the elected President of the Conservative Convention, and it gives me great pleasure that this also means I am your conference chairman for 2022. Welcome. It gives me particular satisfaction, not just because we have a new female leader of the Conservative Party, which makes 3 to Labour's 0, yes, but for a very different and personal reason. Rab Butler, my grandfather, held the position of conference chairman in 1956. So let us consider what are the changes that have taken place since Rab's day. Well, in 1956, we would not have been worried about whether it was Manchester or Birmingham, or even Blackpool or Bournemouth. The conference was held at what Pathé News calls that lovely tourist town of Llandudno in North Wales, in the Grand Hotel and conference rooms. And packing for this event would have been a greater challenge than it is for today. Rumours suggest that the conference lasted 7 days, with 3 formal black-tie dances, including the Agent's Ball. But I can find scant evidence to prove this. I am old enough to remember Mrs. Thatcher dancing at the Agent's Ball, which was still taking place in the Blackpool Tower when I first went to conference. And I am sure our Prime Minister today must be thankful for small mercies that she is no longer expected to be compared to the Strictly Come Dancing competitions held there. Rab, as conference chairman in 1956, was almost single-handedly in charge of running conference, whilst holding the role of head of Conservative Research Department and leader of the House at that time. This could explain why some of the events were a bit dry that he planned to fill those 7 days, such as the debate between Desmond Donnelly, MP for Pembrokeshire, and Bernard Brain, worthy and august gentlemen as they were, MP for South East Essex. No further detail exists of the topic they were speaking on in the Radio Times, but the BBC's Light programme assures you that their debate was coming straight from conference. Well, it's clear that they weren't competing for an audience looking for a free gin option or snacks when choosing which event to go to, isn't it? Luckily for our attendees, I am not in charge of the programme, although I would quite like to bring back dancing. But today we have a team of conference experts working with our Prime Minister's office who bring this year together with more fringe events and a new innovative programme on this main stage to hear our ministers speak of their plans for our country. And all this is done at late notice, with many of the same team delivering our leadership elections in August. So it is with relief that, as chairman, I can rely on the experience and professionalism of our modern party staff at CCHQ. And I would like to thank them particularly for the amazing work that they have done to get this conference together in such short time with the new team at Downing Street. Now, I hope you will all have a good time and welcome to Conference 2022.
Please welcome the Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt.
Royal Navy's in. It's been just 3 weeks, since we lost Her Majesty the Queen. As we face new challenges without her, we would do well to keep her in our thoughts. History, after all, is experience. Remember that she became our Queen just 7 years after the bloodiest conflict humanity had ever seen. We were a nation facing debt, hardship, rationing, and the daunting task of modernising in the twilight of empire. It was said of the King's death that Britain had lost its balance wheel, that part of a watch which moves the hands forward, which keeps the beat, which keeps things steady. The world witnessed a young woman, pale with grief, pledge her whole life to our nation's service. Doubt and despair gave way to hope. Her pledge turned out to be a shining gift to the world. She saw us through change and challenge, constitutional crisis, conflict, COVID. And every time we battled, we had Her Majesty alongside us, advising us, guiding us, unifying us all, and reminding us of the challenges we'd faced together in her long life, many much greater than we face now. Her gift was calmness, confidence, courage. She enabled us to stay the course. And she gave us a common bond and a common goal between us all, between nations, beyond politics, for prosperity, for security, for unity, for a united kingdom. No words of mine can do justice to the depth of her devotion to us. She sacrificed her time, her freedom, her private life, and her passing was felt deeply in every place on earth because it reminded us of our own grief for loved ones we'd lost, because she had shared her family with us. You see, crowns are not made of precious metals and jewels alone. They are mostly made of duty and love. So when she died, we carried her on a river of love, from Balmoral to her final resting place at Windsor. Its tributaries weren't just pageantry, they were personal. There were the guards of honour from tractor drivers and horse riders. There were the crayoned drawings attached to railings and carpets of flowers and an enormous amount of cling-wrapped marmalade sandwiches. And prayers and thanks from every faith, and the ceremony of her church, the state, and her armed forces. Vigils and silences in the fading autumn light. Everyone played their part. Everyone worked together. That unity and pride and dignity are things that we will remember for the rest of our lives. It made us proud of our Queen and our country. Her final gift was to show us the truth about her remarkable reign. The revelation was in her meticulously planned final appearance. You see, our late monarch did not stamp her personality on the nation. She was the one shaped by us, by all of us, her people. The stoic, dignified, kind, patient, dutiful, queue-loving British people. That's why she was the best of us. As we mourned, we leaned on our constitution, on our traditions, and on our planning. We saw the pride, the people, causes, and organisations she cherished, and that this nation was the cradle for, many of which were represented in her funeral procession. And we saw the values that bind us, because they were embodied in her. And we calmly got on with it, cheerfully facing change and challenge. And we coped really well. An entirely new government was formed. Strike action of both the rail dispute variety and the football variety was cancelled. Supply of arms and support for Ukraine never faltered. We kept calm and we carried on, because that is what great people and great nations do. We're not measured in triumph, we are measured in challenge. And in that final journey, she brought us together again. She made us realize that duty and sacrifice and tolerance and, above all, love are everything to the British way of life. But most of all, we were filled with good wishes for our new king. He bears the same cross that she did, that all do that wear the crown. He will be our new balance wheel. He will be by our side in the new challenges that we face. We will face them together. We should not and we will not be daunted by them. We will remember our duty. We will continue to move things forward, to keep things steady, not to miss a beat, and to bring hope. Do not forget what she taught us. Do not forget what we must do. Do not forget who we are. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
I declare before you all, my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
This is BBC News from London. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Your first audience with Her Majesty the Queen is really a pretty nerve-wracking experience because the equerry tells you all sorts of things that you've got to do, where to shake hands, how to shake hands, what to say, how to address Her Majesty, and you're kind of worried you're gonna stuff it up. But after a few moments, it becomes incredibly informal, and she's brilliant at asking questions that elicit a great torrent of stuff, and there's a lot of laughter. There certainly was with the audiences that I had. Sadly and rightly, I can't tell you what she said or what we said, but there was a lot of laughter.
Well, of course, this was taken at my first audience because my first audience was the one when I went to the palace and the Queen invited me to form a government. And at that moment when you walk through the door and you have that first audience, it becomes real that you are Prime Minister, you're taking on this privileged position, but also this responsibility. But Her Majesty was so good at putting everybody at their ease. And both that audience and the audiences I then went on to have with her subsequently, they were conversations. She was incredibly well informed, had immense experience, knowledge and wisdom. And it's a moment in the week when you're away from the hurly-burly of politics and you can actually sit down with somebody with experience and wisdom, knowledge and understanding and have that conversation about the issues of the day.
Well, my first audience was pretty extraordinary because, of course, we had a hung parliament. The Conservatives were much the biggest party after a great election victory in 2010. But when I went to see Her Majesty, I had to ask, I'd like to form a government, but I can't tell you exactly what sort of government it's going to be because Gordon Brown had left Downing Street and the coalition hadn't quite been put in place. So I think although she had seen Prime Ministers come and Prime Ministers go, I think this was probably the first time someone had said, I can't tell you exactly what the government's going to look like, but I will form one.
Well, the first audience was surprisingly relaxed. I expected it might be a little distant, a little difficult, but it wasn't. I was greeted at the door, I was introduced to the Queen, we sat down in 2 chairs. There was absolutely no one else present except a large ring of corgis, most of whom were well behaved, but not invariably on every occasion. And that was it. There was no private secretary, no notes. And it was just a conversation. Nothing was barred, nothing was out of court. Everything was discussed, and if the Queen wished to raise subjects, she did. If she wished to respond to what I was telling her, she certainly did. And I found it both very cathartic, very interesting, and something, frankly, that one looked forward to each week.
It was an extraordinary treat to be able to go to Balmoral every year for 6 years. And one of the best parts was when, in the evening, you'd get into Her Majesty's car, a Range Rover, and she would drive at breakneck speed up the hill and onto the moor, and there at a sort of converted bothy, an old cottage on the hill, would be the Duke of Edinburgh with a barbecue he'd built himself, barbecuing grouse for your dinner. And I'm not making this up, you sat down and Prince Philip and Her Majesty the Queen served your dinner and cleared it away and washed it up while you sat talking with the other guests. And I remember I think it was sort of year 5, I thought, well, I now surely can help, and got up and put on the marigolds and started doing the washing up. And I remember Her Majesty saying, what on earth is the Prime Minister doing? I'd broken with the protocol, rapidly sat back down and did what I was told.
The UK hosted the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in 2018. And we were very fortunate. Her Majesty was at the opening ceremony in Buckingham Palace. And she was also willing to open up, she very kindly opened Windsor Castle up for us to have some of the part of the meeting. One of the events that I remember was we were having a meeting at Windsor Castle, we were having a lunch, we had a reception before the lunch. Nobody apart from myself and one or two officials knew that Her Majesty would be coming to that reception. She walked into that room and immediately the atmosphere changed. There was this huge sense of love and respect for her, and people wanted to talk to her, and she just had lit the room up.
I know for a fact that world leaders coveted nothing more than to be bathed in the luster of her radiance. And I remember vividly as Foreign Secretary how they would lobby me, I won't give you their names, but they would lobby me to come not on a government-to-government visit. They didn't want to meet the politicians. They wanted a state visit because they hoped for the chance to meet Her Majesty the Queen. And that was because they knew quite what she had seen and done in her life. And they knew, like Barack Obama, that she truly was one of the most remarkable world leaders, if not the most remarkable world leader that he'd ever met.
When the Queen was surrounded by other world leaders, particularly at meetings of CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, it was quite extraordinary to see how they all wished to be close to the Queen, to shake hands with the Queen, to be photographed with the Queen. She was not only the head of the Commonwealth, she was to them quite a remarkable figure. It is absolutely and completely impossible to imagine they would have reacted that way had we been a republic and had the head of our state been a president. It was the magic of the monarchy and the magic of that particular monarch that made such a remarkable reaction from people.
I think her greatest legacy is demonstrating just what a brilliant model our constitutional monarchy is. She was an extraordinary symbol of national unity. She brought the country together, but she also did so much to represent and symbolise Britain abroad. And that was really based on the fact that she was so true to her word when she was in her 20s and said, whether my life be long or short, it will be dedicated to your service. She fulfilled that in every year and every month and every week of her reign.
I think the extent to which she was a very human being was most beautifully illustrated when she sat alone in her seat at the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh. It indicated to the extent that behind the monarch, behind the pageantry, behind the majesty of the throne, there was a family, there was a human, there was a marriage, and the Queen faced exactly the same difficulties in her private life as everybody in this country can imagine in their own lives. And that particular poignant picture is one I think that will remain in my mind for the rest of my life, and I think will remain in history too.
One of the striking characteristics of Her late Majesty was her devotion to duty. She gave a selfless life of service, and she'd committed to when she was 21. At just the age of 21, she said she would devote her life, however long or short, to our service, and she did that. And in a world of, if you like, celebrity and sort of people wanting to grab the limelight, she was very humble as well. And I hope that there will be a legacy for the country of more of a sense of the importance of service and duty.
I think there has been no other monarch in our history who has seen such a phenomenal increase in the prosperity, in the opportunity, in the longevity of the British people as she has in her reign. And for that reason alone, I think that she should be recorded as Elizabeth the Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we sing the national anthem, would you join me in standing, if you can, for a minute's silence to remember Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II.
Party conference throughout the show, so stay tuned with us. I'm Nana Akua. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. Joining me is, of course, the fabulous Lizzie Cundy. I've got Danny Kelly with me as well, alongside former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, and also former Labour Shadow Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. We will be bringing you all this conference throughout the day here on GB News, so make sure you stay with us. Now, also very interesting, wasn't it? Because we've heard quite a lot there. We heard from all the, initially from Penny Mordaunt, who gave quite a nice talk about the Queen. We had a minute's silence also. But during that, there were some recaps of some of the ex-Tory Prime Ministers. I mean, what were you thinking as you saw all of that?
I thought, obviously, paying tribute to the Queen is a very good way of starting a conference. Keir Starmer got all of the Labour people up to sing God Save the King, which I certainly don't... We used to sing the Red Flag, now it's God Save the King. It's a modest step in the right direction, I think. But I have to say, the big news today, there are many big news today, is that Liz Truss has told King Charles, and he said Prince Charles, he can't go to the COP conference, the Environment World Conference in Cairo, even though that's been his dedicated life's work. And I find that patronising and offensive. He would obey the rules. He wouldn't say anything that would embarrass the British government. But this is something he has so passionately committed his life to. The first act of this Prime Minister, for as long as she's there, is to say to our new king, all the stuff that you've believed in and fought for, you're not allowed to even sort of hum it at a conference. And that's bad for Britain, because he is a champion around the world, and to take one of our best-known world leaders and not allow him to speak makes Britain look like a very small country.
But he did promise that he wouldn't get involved in sort of political things, you know, so this could be an example to us that he's not going to do that. Ben, Your view on what Dennis has just said, Ben Habib?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's the most pressing issue facing the nation, whether King Charles goes to the COP20... Is it COP28 or COP27?
27. 27. Nothing much has happened since.
I mean, it might also, Dennis, be a statement, a subliminal message to the British people that we're going to take one step away from this drive towards net zero, which is going to cost the country £1.4 trillion, and effectively, in my book, is the biggest regressive tax on the working and middle classes ever imposed by a government. So it might be a signal that this, Liz Truss is taking a step back from that EU globalist, supranational-driven agenda for net zero. And that would be quite welcome.
Well, OK, Ben, I spent this afternoon going around my little house turning all the radiators off, and I wish to goodness that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it don't matter whether it's Labour or Tory, we as a country had got serious about insulating our homes, about reducing energy use, changing in the best practice way to not be so dependent on Putin, on oil sheiks and the rest.
But Dennis, can I ask, who was it that decided that they would stop all the nuclear...
Exactly.
The evolution of nuclear
exactly
power?
right.
Do you know who it was?
I'll tell you.
Yes, go on.
Tony Blair.
Exactly. So,
well, in that case, I mean, he's wrong, and I said he was wrong. I've been a key
He's wrong about a lot of things. Went to war on a lie. There's 8.4 billion in blood and treasure. Let me tell you.
I did say. Under Tory, under Labour. Can we get away from this sort of, it's all Labour's...
Well, we're not. No, we just pulled out something that you said and confirmed that it was actually the Labour Party's fault for that one.
But both have done long-term decisions why we're in this predicament.
I don't think, Dennis, it makes us look a small country, the fact that the rules are being abided to. The rules are, if you're a monarch, then you stay out of politics. Now, I think it is a political issue, the environment, I really do, because there are people on both sides of the argument. And I think that if the king is allowed to... Well, you look at me as if you're surprised that there are people on both sides of the argument. No. Of course there are. So the king and the monarch and the rules are the fact that you can't get involved in politics. And unfortunately, it's become a political issue. So I don't know how it makes us look a small country. COP27 lasts for like 3 or 4 days, maybe a week. And the fact that the king isn't there, I don't think that makes us marginalised or belittled in any way.
Let's just disagree. I think it would be good for Britain to have its king.
Yeah, but just demonstrate why it makes us a small country, though.
Because simply it was the Prime Minister going in and telling him that he shouldn't go. Of course he would obey her. He knows the rules. And the Number 10 Downing Street knows he knows the rules. I had to deal with Prince Charles's letters and things when I was a Foreign Office Minister. Of course he obeys the rules. I just regret the fact that in the midst of all the other funny bits and pieces of stories, this is one perhaps where we could have just been a bit more tolerant, respect his 74 years, I think this November, and really 50 of those pretty strongly dedicated to this particular issue. It's not just the current net zero stuff.
Well, can I just say, Dennis, to be honest, I on this occasion I think it would have been good if he'd gone, only because of where we are. It's sort of, I think it would be nice for him to go. However, I'm not really with the net zero agenda, so half of me is just saying, well, it's nice for him to go and represent this country and say that we're interested in, perhaps improving our own environment in terms of emissions and things like that. But I don't really subscribe to the whole net zero notion, so it is a political message if he does go. So I'm a bit divided on this.
It's a slippery slope if King Charles starts getting involved in the political arena.
And we know he has a desire to
exactly,
get involved.
We know he does. Look, they have frank and open conversations each week. The King and the Prime Minister will, but that's as far as it should go.
Yeah.
Right, he's not there to do the politics.
Hey, gang, we've just heard all these wonderfully warm words about Her Majesty, and I've got lots of lovely Queen stories. We haven't got time to tell them, all of which I agree with. And now we're sort of treating the new monarch as sort of a political interferer, as a busy...
He is,
but we know that he's done it in the past.
We're not treating him like that. He has done it, but he promised he wouldn't, and this is probably his way of showing us that he means business, and he's not going to do that. But I think, for me, he's slightly misguided, because on this one, actually, I would have been quite comfortable with him going, as long as he didn't sort of, go on about climate change too much, but just, it's nice to see the world leaders talking together about how they're going to protect and look after the planet, But the rush
But
to
he's
net
had some
zero-
pretty wacky ideas. Didn't he say that cows should wear masks? Do you remember this one?
I don't
About the
remember
gas.
that.
Oh, there's been a few ideas he's had. No, it's not right for him to be
think
involved in politics.
I think if he's worried about methane, I think it's the other end of the cow. That should have some sort of filtration system.
But as we know,
was my point.
But as we know, it depends what mask he's wearing, because a lot of the masks don't actually work.
No, Prince William might go. He might pick up the baton.
He's allowed to, because he's the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
And he's a big believer in it. And I remember at the Jubilee celebrations, he made a long speech at his mother's celebration on the subject, didn't he?
Yeah.
But he was allowed to talk about these things as Prince Charles, but he's now the king.
Yeah, exactly.
So
No, not about Prince William. Prince William made a long speech.
We're going live now to cross to the Conservative Party conference just now because Andy Street is speaking.
But as the manufacturing, the exporting, the conferencing capital of the UK, it's no surprise it's been very difficult. But the good news is that with incredible resilience, teamwork, and that Brummie ingenuity, we are bouncing back. And the best evidence of that bouncing back is, of course, our wonderful Commonwealth Games this summer. Now, you must have seen the sporting excellence, but it went well beyond that. We told our story through the Games, or more precisely, through a giant, clunking, mechanical bull. And if you came to see the bull, I'm sorry, he's just resting, but he will be back, I promise. And we told our history, which hasn't always been an easy history, through our wonderful opening and closing ceremonies, where a young Pakistani woman who found sanctuary here and an ageing rock star were the real star turns. And we told our story of welcome, of diversity, of togetherness, and we told the world of our comfort with ourselves. It was a Games of new jobs, new businesses, new investment, and it was a Games that in the main was funded by our Conservative government. And I do want to say a big thank you to Theresa May, because it was her who gave us our chance. I hope we seized it and delivered for the city, the region, the country and the Commonwealth. So what else has been going on then over those 4 years? We've been building a lot. Guess when you came here before, you stepped through the building site around you to get to conference. Now we have a beautiful city centre that could grace any European city. But it's not just right here in the city that we've been building. Across the region, we're building new homes, hitting our housing targets. We're dealing with brownfield first while protecting our green belt. And we've been connecting ourselves up across the region with new transport, new stations in Coventry and Wolverhampton, new extensions to our metro, new rapid bus routes, and if you want to go and test it, a new Boris bike scheme just outside. And we've been winning investment in those business areas of the future. Electric vehicles in Coventry, future housing and construction in Wolverhampton, and here in Birmingham, finance amongst everything else. And the biggest coup of all was probably to get Goldman Sachs to make this their second headquarters. And when you ask everyone, well, why have you come to the West Midlands? They all say the same. It's the talent that's on offer here. And yes, we do now have the best qualified workforce we've ever had. And it makes me reflect. It takes me back personally to when I was 18, perhaps in the pubs of Birmingham with my friends, thinking about our futures. And there was one assumption: we'd have to leave to get on in life. It's no longer true. Now, if you're 18, you can have the career for life that you dream of here. And back in 2019, more young Brummies wrong way round, failed the line. More young Londoners came to Birmingham than young Brummies went to London. That is levelling up in action. And of course, we've been tackling net zero. That continues to be the defining challenge of our era. So we're busy electrifying automotive, decarbonising transport, and of course, retrofitting our homes. And the most recent announcement, the first net zero neighbourhood here in Dudley. So the big question is, how's all that come about? How have we made it happen? And the simple answer is about working together, about collaboration. First of all, with our brilliant Conservative team, our 14 MPs, many of the activists, the members in the room, and of course, our 3 outstanding urban councils. In Dudley, long famed for its All Right Bab Living Museum, but now famed for its urban regeneration. In Walsall, leading on the critical challenge of homelessness. And in Solihull, where net zero is a way of life. All of them playing their part. And then with businesses, Severn Trent, who've delivered on the promise of the greenest games ever. And with National Grid, who've cut our bus fares so we're now lower than 2014, a big saving to everybody. And with our community and faith groups as we stand against any intolerance. So what now for the West Midlands? Well, it's very simple. We will deliver on our plan for growth, bringing new businesses, new jobs, new ideas, all born in our universities. And we will be spurred on by the Prime Minister's vision for these investment zones. You don't know it, but you have just walked through the most successful enterprise zone in Britain as you came to conference. Public and private coming together to see that regeneration. So we know the policy will work. So in conclusion, my message to conference and to government is very, very simple. Back us, back the West Midlands, back the next stage of devolution, and we will deliver, we will level up, because we know it's the right thing to do. And the Prime Minister's words encapsulated. She said very simply, when the West Midlands succeeds, the country succeeds. That's right. We look forward to working together to do just that. Thank you. Enjoy Birmingham. And I'm very pleased now to introduce the chairman of our party, Jake Berry.
My fellow Conservatives, my friends, hello and welcome. Welcome to our conference. Welcome to this great city of Birmingham. And when I look at the audience today, I don't just see colleagues. I see friends and Conservatives from all over the country. Friends from Scotland, friends from Wales, friends from Northern Ireland, friends from the Midlands, the South, and of course the North of England too. And I want to reassure you all, even though you may think I look a bit like Mick Lynch, I'm happy to report that despite his best efforts, we are going to have a great conference here in Birmingham. Now, we know it will take more than a union baron to stop the Conservative Party delivering. Because when I look around this room, I see friends, people who went out there in the wind, in the rain, in the snow, the ice, the darkness of that 2019 December election, knocking on those doors. So we know it wasn't only CCHQ that won that election. Indeed, it wasn't only Boris Johnson, fine Conservative that he is. It was you. You won the election in 2019. You cut that swathe from Murray to Maldon, from St Ives to Scarborough. And your historic victory was driven by millions of people up and down our country who laid aside their old tribal loyalties. They didn't just vote Conservative. They voted for change. They voted for action. They voted for delivery. But my friends, you also know it would be a mistake for us to believe that 2019 general election vote was an unconditional vote for our party, the Conservative Party. And if we're going to hold those gains, in fact, if we're going to build on those gains and win the next election, we know it's time to deliver, deliver, deliver. And let me tell you, our new Prime Minister knows how to deliver. Liz Truss is a woman of action. Conference, as Margaret Thatcher told us, in politics, If you want something done, you ask a man. Sorry, if you want something said, you ask a man. If you want something done, who do you ask? You ask a woman. And of course, we know you can only level up by getting things done. We know the people who voted Conservative want to get things done. They want us to prove them right. They want to stand in their pub and tell their friends, I voted Conservative in 2019 and my town is getting better. But Conservatives also know you can only deliver levelling up by going for growth. That's why we're going to drive down tax to level up our country. But if we're going to win that historic fifth term in government, I'm sorry to tell you, it's going to take a lot of hard graft. I'm going to be meeting with you again on the doorsteps of our cities, of our towns, of our villages. In fact, all over this great country, we will show that we have repaid that vote of trust, that vote of thanks and that support for the Conservative Party by uniting and levelling up our country. Now, I know we can do it. In fact, more than that, I know you can do it. So, conference, levelling up, it's a team game. Government can't do it on its own. It's a partnership between civic leaders and businesses. And that's why all of the Conservative councillors sat in this hall today are so important to our party. We are going to work with you all, those strong local leaders, because you are the ones who will deliver levelling up. And it's now my pleasure to introduce someone who has delivered time and time again. In fact, the embodiment of one of those Conservative-minded civic leaders who is getting on and delivering for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to the stage Ben Houchin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, conference, and thank you for that very kind and warm introduction, Jake. I'll remember to buy you a drink later on. For those of you that don't know, though, my name is Ben Houchin, and I am...
Conference. He's talking through. If you've just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Joining me, Ben Habib, also Dennis McShane. I've also got Danny Kelly and Lizzie Cundy. Now, the Andy Street, he was talking about the West Midlands because he's the mayor of West Midlands. And I'm just going to bring it to Danny because you are a West Midlander.
Well, I'm a Scouser. And
I was going to say, that's not a
I'm a Scouser, but
why
I spent 15 years at the BBC in Birmingham.
That's what I meant.
I spent 5.
In Birmingham.
He trumps you, 15.
Well,
15.
And Andy Street mentioned something about the first time ever that Brummies, more Londoners come to work in Birmingham than Brummies go to work in London. As a Scouser growing up in the 80s, there was a saying that the population of Liverpool doubles at Christmas time when people come back. And that's a sign of an impoverished city. That's a sign of a failing city, if you like. And Liverpool is the same as Birmingham. Now, people flock to Liverpool. Liverpool benefited from billions of pounds because it was the European capital of culture, and Liverpool is a regenerated city. Yeah. And Birmingham, likewise, although they haven't benefited from billions of pounds, nevertheless, big conglomerates want to be in the city, and it is the second city. And there was a joke going around that Manchester was really the second city. But no, Birmingham is. And it's brilliant to work in Birmingham. It's a fabulous place. It's vibrant. It's full of great people. The outskirts are a bit moody. You know, we need to be honest. They're a bit moody. But
I don't think they'd be happy with you calling it...
Well, they are moody. They're a little bit moody.
In what? I don't understand.
Well, you know, they still have problems with drugs and violence, and there's lots of gang culture in Birmingham,
that's
unfortunately.
Almost everywhere now.
Well, it's not in Royal Leamington Spa, where I've driven down from this afternoon. So there are, we need to be honest, you know, but the city itself is a great place.
I agree with Danny. I stood for Parliament for the first time in 1974 as a sort of 3-year-old in Solihull. And that's a very moody place. It's where all the kind of rich Brummies who make their pile but don't want to admit they live in Birmingham. They go and buy a house in Solihull, Sutton.
That's it, Dennis.
Big golf courses, tennis club,
very nice.
all the rest of it. But I did. I went straight from the same college Liz Truss was at Oxford to a graduate traineeship in Birmingham, and I was a bit nervous because I'm a London lad. I completely agree with you, Danny. It's a great city.
It is brilliant,
the
Danny.
best time of my working life there.
Ben Habib, what are your thoughts? Have you really been to Birmingham?
Well, I was there this morning.
Yes.
I was at the Reform Party conference and I spoke at Richard Tice's do. And I can concur. I think Birmingham's a great city. It's the home of Peaky Blinders, isn't it? And that, you've watched Peaky Blinders, presumably. I haven't just dumbfounded the panel, which I thought was a great show. Birmingham's a great city. I went to school at Rugby, which is round the corner. Used to do exchanges with Birmingham, and it's come a long, long way. And actually, what we have had, Jake touched on it in his speech, what we've had is 40 years. He didn't quite say this, but we've had 40 years of economic prosperity across the United Kingdom. You know, it's very easy for us to get down in the mouth and talk about crisis after crisis, but we've had 40 years of economic prosperity. And Birmingham and Liverpool are both great beneficiaries of that economic prosperity. And, you know, what we've got to make sure, of course, is that we continue to deliver going forward.
But, Ben, there's one key stat that Andy Street, reasonably, is a very good manager of John Lewis, CEO, and I think he's a very good sort of chief executive. He's not really a politician as mayor of the West Midlands. Didn't mention 1 in 5 of all Birmingham households are underneath the poverty line. This, I think, finally is beginning to hammer home, especially with the increase in heating, the increase in mortgages. We have actually, for the last 10 years, not lifted a finger to seriously eliminate poverty. And that's coming home to roost. It's very nice.
I don't think you can say that, really. I think that's not true. People have lifted a finger to try and help with poverty.
They've tried, OK, but they haven't done it.
That's a bit far-fetched, especially, I mean, we've had to deal with COVID, and there were packages to help people to try and assist so that people didn't go hungry and starving.
1 in 5 Brummies.
But that's a long-term thing to deal with, isn't it? He talked a lot about working together, and he did talk about homelessness that you've pointed out. And one place he mentioned was Solihull, where he said net zero was a way of life. And they've got sort of a bus service that's on a sort of grid thing where they're low carbon, and they've got this wonderful vision that they want to go net zero. Everyone's going for this net zero.
Net zero, yeah. Well, I mean, I worked in Birmingham loads at the NEC, doing all the big shows there, and it was a really vibrant place. I mean, it was great fun, and stayed in Solihull. But I have to disagree. I mean, the thing is that we're dealing with is we're still got the effects of lockdown. We've had the lockdown crisis, you know, and that's sadly where there's been so much mental health.
That's what it is. It's the lockdown crisis. We've got to call it right. You're
I know,
quite right.
It's not the pandemic, it's a lockdown crisis, and sadly we're living with that now.
Well, we are living with that now, and you know, we'll be talking all about that. It's the Tory Party conference today and across the next few days. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, we'll be returning to the Tory Party conference in Birmingham and getting a reaction from my panel. But now it's time to get an update with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry for most with some clear spells, but there'll be a few showers in parts of western Scotland. Let's take a look at the details. Skies will be clear across the southwest England this evening, and it'll turn chilly in the countryside as temperatures fall into single figures. Any cloud in southeast England will gradually melt away to leave clear skies this evening. A few mist and fog patches could form in the countryside. Dry this evening in Wales and turning cold across the country. A little mist may form in the valleys as the evening progresses. Mist and fog patches are also possible across the Midlands, particularly in the east. It will be a dry end to the day with starry skies and feeling chilly out there too. A few late showers will move into northwest England this evening, but most places should stay dry. Skies will be clear across the northeast with light winds. There could be a few late showers across southwest Scotland towards the end of the day, but many places will be dry, particularly in the east, where skies will be clear. A cloudier picture across Northern Ireland this evening, although many places will be dry. There could be just a few light showers around coastal areas at the end of the day. Apart from a few showers in the northwest tonight, most places will stay dry. There'll be increasing amounts of cloud in the northwest and some lingering fog patches in the south. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christie's. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio now for the next hour. Me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get an update with your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. It's just coming up to 5 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom.
The Conservative Party conference is now underway in Birmingham, opening with tributes to Her Majesty the Queen. Party members stood for a minute's silence in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth. The Cabinet remained standing to sing the national anthem in praise of King Charles III. Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, said the late Queen saw the country through its many challenges.
Her gift was calmness, confidence, courage. She enabled us to stay the course. And she gave us a common bond and a common goal between us all, between nations, beyond politics, for prosperity, for security, for unity, for a united kingdom.
Meanwhile, Liz Truss is standing by her tax-cutting plans in spite of acknowledging the government made mistakes in the handling of the mini-budget. Just a warning of flash photography coming up. This morning, the Prime Minister spoke on the BBC Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, and she defended the government's package and refused to rule out public spending cuts. Ms Truss also said the Cabinet was not informed in advance of plans to abolish the top rate of tax and that it was a decision taken by Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng.
I do want to say to people that I understand their worries about what has happened this week, and I do stand by the package we announced, and I stand by the fact that we announced it quickly because we had to act. But I do accept we should have laid the ground better. I do accept that.
You accept you should have laid the ground better.
I have learnt from that. I have learnt from that, and I will make sure that in future we do a better job of laying the ground.
Ms Truss has also refused to rule out real-term cuts in welfare payments, despite saying pensions would rise in line with inflation. Speaking in the same interview with the BBC, she was clear that she's committed to the triple lock, protecting them against price increases, not ruling out a reverse on Boris Johnson's promise to maintain the raise in benefit payments in line with inflation. She said the Work and Pensions Secretary is looking at it. Well, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has told the Tory party conference that Ukraine will succeed in pushing out Russian invaders. His comments come as the Ukrainian president says Russian forces retreated from the key eastern town of Liman. A video shared online shows Ukrainian soldiers announcing the capture outside the town council building. Hours before the retaking of the town, Russia's defense ministry announced it was pulling troops out of the area. The capture came just a day after President Putin proclaimed the annexation of nearly a fifth of Ukraine. Merseyside police have charged a 34-year-old man with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Thomas Cashman is accused of killing the 9-year-old who was shot in her home in Liverpool last month. Cashman has also been charged with the attempted murder of Olivia's mother and convicted burglar Joseph Nee, who was chased into the property. A second man, 40-year-old Paul Russell, has been charged with assisting an offender. Both men will appear in court on Monday. Well, FIFA's president has called it a dark day for football after 125 people died in a stampede at a match in Indonesia. Officers fired tear gas in an attempt to control crowds after supporters of the losing team invaded the pitch in the East Java province. In a panic, thousands surged towards the stadium's exits. An investigation has been launched and the country's president has ordered the league to be halted. More than 40,000 people have taken part in the London Marathon today. It's the third time the 26.2-mile race has taken place in October after it was moved due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Organisers say it will return to its traditional spring slot next year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's over to Nana.
Good afternoon. If you just joined me, this is GB News. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. Now, we will bring you all the moments that are happening at the Tory party conference, but how could I not do this? It is time for this week's Outside. And my guest today was born on the side of a road in Leicester in a caravan. And now he's one of the UK's richest men. Alfie Best left school at the age of 12 and threw himself into the world of business just 2 years later, buying and selling cars. Now, he was born into an impoverished gypsy family, and he's no stranger to hard times. He founded Europe's largest home park operator, Wild Crest Parks. That was 15 years ago. And now it's valued at a whopping £500 million. Oh, yes, he also hit our screens appearing on My Big Fat Gypsy Fortune, as well as having a cameo in the film Once Upon a Time in London. The key to his success, he says, is 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration. Alfie Best has achieved the status of a successful entrepreneur and a multi-millionaire businessman. I'm pleased to say that Alfie joins me now. Alfie, my goodness, how does it feel being that rich?
I don't know, but with a build-up like that, I was looking around and finding out where that fella's gone.
Oh, that's you, that is. Did you, in your wildest dreams, imagine that you'd be in this position now?
No, I don't think... I think anybody that says they know their own journey, we can all, you know, plan and hope what our journey's going to be, but we all come across obstacles along the way. So, no, to be fair, no.
So your childhood then, because it says you were born in Leicester. I mean, talk to me about what your upbringing was like and what gave you that drive to continue to, you know, go forward and build so many different businesses.
I come from an extremely loving family. We were poor, but my mum and dad were, you know, the best mum and dad anybody could ever want for. And to be fair, I didn't know that we were poor. You know, you only know poverty when you get older and you see the difference in society. But for me, you know, we didn't starve, but were we poor? Yeah. You know, we did live on the side of the road. We lived in a caravan. My mum would cook outside on a pot, and that was the daily staple diet. But it wasn't bad. You know, you only know your surroundings that's around you. And obviously I saw, you know, the reason that, you know, we lived on the side of the road is my mum and dad loved trucks and cars.
That's really fun, bless them. They like trucks and cars, so they thought we'll just live on the side of a road.
I'm only kidding.
No, it's not true, is it? I believe that as well.
But, so look, yeah, I've had a blessed life. But as David Beckham said, the harder he practices, the luckier he seems to get. And for me, I've been blessed to love what I do. I worked, my career, if you can put it as that, or my business career, has been one of self-taught education because I didn't really have any schooling. You know, it was periodic that I went to school, and I never went to school past 12 years old. And I was out working with my dad most of the time after that. And I went through several different businesses, you know, from van and truck sales to van and truck hire, to mobile communications and mobile phones, then into commercial property, and now into what our main business is, which is retirement mobile home parks. And that's the business that I found my passion in. And when people, in this country, we are only just starting to embrace business and entrepreneurship. Before, it was frowned upon to discuss finance and figures and money. And I think that's where America had the edge on us. You know, they've promoted business entrepreneurs so much more than the UK has. The UK, unless you're an actor or a sports personality, as a businessman, we've only ever had really three, and Freddie Laker, Richard Branson and Alan Sugar.
Well, and you, that's four.
Well, for me, all I'm doing is hopefully shouting from the rooftops that anybody can do it. If somebody like me can do it, and I'm not a smart man, then believe me, anybody can do it.
Well, I think because at school, the kind of qualities I think an entrepreneur demonstrates are not really valued in a sense. I think they often at school, their focus is on if you're really good at history, if you're really good at something where you can just rope-type learning, where you can just literally learn something, stare at it, learn it, and then repeat it the way it's meant to be and present it the way they want it. But
I'm going to be honest with you, I think that our education system is broken.
Yeah.
And if I can explain what I mean.
Well, I agree with you, actually.
When you take your driving test, when you're doing your driving test, you take your theory. So you learn the laws of the road, your signpost, and, basically what your academics are. But they don't then give you the keys when you pass your theory. They don't say, there's the keys, now you can drive. You now have to sit beside somebody and you have to do the practical. So you learn to actually physically drive on the road. Whereas in school, you take your exams, your GCSEs or O-levels or whatever they are today, and as soon as you pass them, you get given the keys to the world and you're on your own. But you're not only on your own, you're on your own in debt. So for me, shouldn't it be not only the academic, but the practical side as well, to actually nurture people into business, to find their passion?
But did you have that day? Because you left school at 12. Was it your father who was the person who nurtured you through those businesses?
Look, I was thrown in at the deep end, and from the age of 12 to 16, I was knocking on doors selling tarmac. And that's the hardest job in the world, because, knocking on the door saying to somebody that you're resurfacing someone else's drive down the street, would you be interested in having yours done, is soul destroying. But what it also done was taught me how to read people, because you had 90 seconds in which to sell your pitch, and if you didn't, the door was getting slammed. So you got to read people's demeanour quite well. That set me up as far as I'm concerned. And it also made me a little bit more thick-skinned, being able to, in the UK we are a polite nation. And you only see that the more and more you travel the world, you realise how polite we are. And I think that's also a skill set, to know when to be polite and when to be firm.
Do you think that because there is an argument, there's this whole sort of kind of softly, everyone must win, this kind of what people might class as a woke culture that's evolving. Do you think that can be a little bit damaging in a sense, because it's almost mollycoddling people and not giving them a sort of expectation that when they come up, that's the way it's going to be? Whereas in reality, it's totally the opposite.
If you give a man a crutch, he will eventually become a cripple, because we rely on it. And that is in any form. And I say it the way I really see it. And I think that what we're doing with people is, instead of nurturing them forward, we're supporting them. And that's fine to support people, and I'm all for that. But that support should come in more of a way to help. Give a man a fishing rod and he'll feed his family for the rest of his life. Give him a fish and he feeds tonight.
So what's your views then of, obviously, the government coming out and helping people with the energy support and these packages that are, the whole lockdown scenario where people were given money to keep their... I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Here's my view on that. Of course that is something the government should be doing, because these are unprecedented times where energy rates have trebled, and they're going to continue. And unfortunately, of no doing or no making of the people that they're supporting. So in our great country, and I use the word great because we are great, and the people that make it great are the British people. We're now a multicultural people that are taking the blessings from every creed, colour or race. But we've only just started to do that in the last 20 years. Before that, we didn't. Now we've become, in my view, more Americanised. Our staple diet was half empty. So you had Coronation Street and EastEnders, and everybody was either suicidal or lost their job. You never see anybody win the lottery, whereas America had Friends and Cheers, and it was upbeat. Social media, I believe, has started to change that in the English culture, and people are now seeing that you can do it if you want it bad enough. And for me, I give speeches, which I'm blessed to do, because I feel if I get to change one person's life to succeed, I haven't just changed his life, I've changed his whole family's life. And I think that's so important for all of us. And even down to people like yourself, that are spreading the story of good, positive, natured stories, showing, hold on, this can happen. This is real. And for me, sorry if I get a bit passionate about it, but for me, that's what we need more of. And we need more of that in the UK.
I would say so, here to that, because I think a lot of the time we seem to be dumbing this country down and saying, and not appreciating how brilliant this country is. I've travelled a lot, and for me, this is the most pleasant, it is the most polite, it is the most welcoming, the least racist country that I've ever had the fortune to be in, and I'm glad I live here. Alfie, for those people who are sort of watching you thinking, what is there some secret behind being a billionaire or being successful? If there was one pearl of wisdom that you could pass to someone to help them move forward, what would that be?
Okay. One answer is persistence. Is persistence. If you take a small hammer and keep tapping at a cliff side, you will put a tunnel through it. It just takes time. Now, what I would say is this, and persistence is the key in everything. But I lost everything when I was 20 years old. I lost everything that I'd worked for. And I was a millionaire at the age of 20. And I suffered a murmur and collapsed across the desk. And, you know, they're life's lessons, that what happened to you or happened to me. And when I tell the story, I get the hairs that come up the back of my neck, because the mistake I made there was I started to believe my own hype. I started to believe what I was telling myself. And the one thing that I can tell anybody, it is imperative to be positive, but always be calculatedly positive. Never over-egg it to yourself, and always be true to your own thoughts. We can tell ourselves how good it is, but we've always got to be able to go, hold on, what is the positive way forward? And if that goes wrong, what's the backstop? And I didn't have a backstop. And I moved out of the house that I was in. I put a mattress in the back of an escort van and slept in the escort van for nearly 6 months. The reason I moved out was because if I hadn't moved out and rented the house, I wouldn't have been able to have paid the mortgage and kept the house. And I was lucky, because the negative that was killing me at the time actually turned out to be the positive that saved me from going bankrupt. And that was a thing called negative equity. Because I owed more than the property was worth, because property prices tumbled by nearly 60%.
I remember that time, yeah.
And all of a sudden, now, as long as I was paying the mortgage, the bank were there to help. And a lot of people criticise banks, but to me, I'm an advocate of all banks, because a bank is there as a business. And what you should remember is when they're giving you mortgages or loans, they're your business partner. So it is imperative to be open, an open book, and be true with your bank. Now, I then went into mobile phones and I found a niche in the market, and I got to 30 and I made £5 million, which was a phenomenal amount of money. I was richer than I'd ever thought I'd ever going to be in my life. And I can honestly say to you, through blood, blisters and tears, I can tell you where every penny and pound came from. And I was 30 then.
Wow.
Since then, my company is actually worth 1.2 billion today. But I couldn't tell you how I actually earned that. And the reason I say that honestly is the company took on a life of its own. I found my passion, which is park home living. I see it as the solution to affordable housing, and not could be, not would be, it is solving part of the affordable housing crisis that we have here in the UK.
Well, listen, Alfie, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. If people want to find out more about this and about what you're doing, do you have somewhere they can go?
The name of my company is called Wildcrest Parks. I'd love them to look up on it, because as far as we're concerned, this is the solution. And especially heading into the downturn we're in, I think it's going to be where people are actually living their best life and still being able to do so.
Alfie, thank you so much for coming to talk to me.
Pleasure's mine.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
That is Alfie Best. He's a billionaire, he's an entrepreneur. Stay with me. Coming up, it is the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, will the Prime Minister's vision reverse the country's economic fortunes? This comes as the Conservative Party conference opens in Birmingham, where Prime Minister Liz Truss will try and reassure MPs, delegates, business people and the members of the party that a mini-budget is the only solution to get the country out of this period of stagnation. I'm joined by former Labour Minister for Europe, Denis McShane, and also former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, on whether the mini-budget is the answer. But first, let's have a quick break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
23 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News, but live on TV, on digital radio and online. I'm Nana Akua, and now it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, will Prime Minister Truss's vision reverse the UK's economic fortunes? Now, since she became Prime Minister, she's declared that tough decisions are needed to change the status quo of the current trajectory of managed decline. Speaking to The Telegraph, Liz Truss remains adamant that slashing red tape for small businesses and simplifying the tax system paves the way for Britain to combat its lack of dynamism. This is despite the constant negative media headlines calling the budget a disaster or a complete gamble on a budget which hasn't even got off the ground yet. Now, this comes as the rebel Tory MPs are preparing to vote against the budget, with former Education Secretary Michael Gove joining the rebels, saying that the tax cuts are not conservative. So following the conference opening and what's predicted to be a hectic week, today I'm asking, will Prime Minister Liz Truss's vision reverse the UK's economic fortunes? So joining me to discuss is former Labour Minister for Europe, Denis McShane, and also former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Ben. What do you think? Of course, Michael Gove joining in on this. He was a Sunak supporter.
Yeah.
Do his actions or words surprise you?
I think the fact that Michael Gove is supporting the opposite stance that Liz Truss has taken is basically an endorsement that Liz Truss is doing the right thing. Michael Gove is a politician of a Cameroonian age. He believes, he's not a traditional Conservative, he believes in large state, large borrowing, high taxation, interference from the state and control from the state. He's part of that brigade, and Rishi Sunak exemplifies it brilliantly, who think they've got a monopoly on intellectual correctitude and that they've got all the answers and they will simply deliver to us prosperity. But that's not how it works, and they're fundamentally wrong. The way countries grow is by cutting taxes, by deregulating, and by the way, we are now one of the most highly taxed, highly regulated countries in the world. The way you grow is to get rid of that red tape, cut back taxes, empower small to medium-sized businesses to become the bigger businesses of the future. That's how it works. It's simple. And Liz Truss, thankfully, after 12 years of mistaken orthodoxy with the Conservative Party, Liz Truss, I think, has actually got it. And I hope she stands firm on her agenda and isn't cowed by all the negative press that she's had in the last week.
I suspect a lot of people is in their interest to maintain the status quo.
It is, absolutely. Well, you know, why it's turkeys and Christmas, isn't it? You wouldn't vote for tax cuts if it means a smaller state, if you're part of the state. You know, so the state is an organism which wishes to grow and promote itself. And the only way for the country to grow is to actually cut that back and put money in people's pockets so they decide how they spend their money and let businesses thrive.
Some people might argue that would increase inflation. Dennis, what do you think?
I just look at the reaction of Conservative MPs and most of the right-wing press. I mean, Labour hasn't got a dog in this fight. Labour MPs are just chortling, of course. I mean, 7 or 8 days of non-stop negative headlines, culminating today in 2 that really struck me. One in the Sunday Times, that Kwasi Kwarteng went to some party of his old hedge fund. He used to work for hedge funds. And they all said, double down, Kwasi, this is wonderful.
No, that's allegedly, that's not necessarily...
Well,
but we don't know that. This is
Sunday Times
speculation.
is a responsible paper. It has it between quotes. There's no reason to doubt it. It was very interesting. Liz Truss on the BBC this morning asked, did the Cabinet discuss this budget? She said, no. And then she just said it was the Chancellor's budget. So she's already distancing herself from his disaster.
But hold on.
But why
he is the Chancellor. It is the Chancellor's budget. That's his job. Why is that a bad thing that it's his budget? It's the fact she distanced herself from the 45% tax reduction. That's the bit that she distanced herself from.
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister's in charge of the country. It's not sort of a budget is cooked up and she just goes along with it. I mean, it was her budget. She's been defending it rather weirdly on local radio and not much better since. We'll see what her speech is like on Wednesday. And I just remember after Black Wednesday, that's to say when Norman Lamont was booted out and we were forced out of the ERM, I was an MP and the mood in the Commons was extraordinary. And I tell you, now, get your reporters to focus, find out when the chicken run starts. That is when Tory MPs, like Boris Johnson in Uxbridge, for example, suddenly start switching and looking for safer seats.
What about, though, the content of the budget rather than the mood? The content, the stuff that was in it, because we are talking about lower tax, less state involvement, less regulation for business. We need to take advantage of the opportunities that Brexit has given us in that respect. What about those things?
We've had 6 years to sort of try and make Brexit work.
Well, let's be honest. Let's be fair. Let's be fair, though, because Brexit wasn't really properly completed until 2019, and then we had the pandemic. So, to be fair...
All right, if you think so. I mean, we've lost a third of our firms are no longer exporting to Europe. We've got enormous red tape problems.
But we can remove the red tape. That's what Brexit is allowing us to do.
No, we can remove the red tape anyway. This is made in Britain red tape. I mean, what we actually see...
There's a huge amount of EU adopted red tape in the United Kingdom. I mean, Liz Truss is absolutely right. For example, and as politically difficult as it might be, to remove the cap on bankers' bonuses. That's a cap on the city's ability to recruit the best people from around the world to work in the United Kingdom. Why would you wish to cap it? The reason the EU put the cap in place was to hold the city back. It was a jealous policy. They used the credit crunch as an excuse, effectively, to hammer, you're laughing, Dennis, but it's true, to tie up the city so that Frankfurt and Paris had a chance to catch up because they're both highly regulated financial markets. No, it's absolutely right. She's right to focus on Solvency II, which is another EU-initiated bit of red tape that ties up unnecessary amounts of institutional capital in reserves. She should get that released so we can get it invested in British businesses. That's what she has to do.
Regulation the last word, Dennis, we've got about a minute.
Our money, on the whole, has been proposed by Conservative governments under pressure from Conservative savers and Conservative business people, and they want to know rules will be obeyed. And frankly, giving a bung of £45,000 to the richest people in the country when so many people are living under the poverty line, if you think that's good politics, Ben...
Which...
we can carry on with that, but we'll see what people think. But that's Dennis McShane, former Labour Minister for Europe, and also Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP. Let's see what your thoughts are then. Mason says, always do what you've always done and you'll always get what you've always had. We need a big change of direction or we just drift into eventual and inevitable bankruptcy. Adam says, not on its own, but as part of the further measures, it might stand a chance. These are comments, of course, for Liz Truss's budget. Ronnie says, too many issues for the economy now. We desperately need a general election and for the UK to rejoin the single market. The Conservatives have moved to a right-wing economy with no middle class. Not another election, please. No, we can't do any more politicking. We need stuff to happen. Well, if you just join me, welcome on board. Joining me, as I've got Dennis McShane and also Ben Habib. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up, we'll continue with our Great British Debate. And I'm asking, will Prime Minister Truss's vision transform the UK's economic fortunes? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Danny Kelly and also Lizzie Cundy. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5:31. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Conservative Party conference is now underway in Birmingham, opening with tributes to Her Majesty the Queen. Party members stood for a minute's silence in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth. The Cabinet remained standing to sing the national anthem in praise of King Charles III. Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, said the late Queen saw the country through its many challenges.
Her gift was calmness, confidence, courage. She enabled us to stay the course. And she gave us a common bond and a common goal between us all, between nations, beyond politics, for prosperity, for security, for unity, for a united kingdom.
At least 125 people have died in a crash at an Indonesian football match that's become one of the world's worst stadium disasters. FIFA's president has called it a dark day for football. Officers fired tear gas to try to control crowds after supporters of the losing home team invaded the pitch in the East Java province. As panic spread, thousands fled towards the stadium's exits, where many suffocated. An investigation has been launched. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian forces have retreated from the key eastern town of Liman. A video shared online shows Ukrainian soldiers celebrating. Hours before the retaking of the town, Russia's defense ministry announced it was pulling troops out of the area amid threats of encirclement. The captures come just a day after Putin proclaimed the annexation of nearly a fifth of Ukraine. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's fast approaching 37 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. You can also stream us live on the GB News app. Now, today I'm asking, will Prime Minister Truss's vision reverse the UK's economic fortunes? Now, the Conservative Party conference has kicked off in Birmingham. We've brought you some of the speeches, and Prime Minister Liz Truss and her Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng will be looking to sell members and MPs on the mini-budget revealed last week. Not obviously sell them literally, but sell the budget is the way I said it. It's the way I said it. Right, the budget entails slashing the red tape, cutting and simplifying the tax system and encouraging small businesses to grow. And it's been viewed as a supply-side economics with a good dose of Thatcherism. So this hour, I want to know whether you think Prime Minister Liz Truss's vision is good and whether you believe it will help reverse the UK's economic fortunes. Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me back is the fabulous Lizzie Cundy and also Danny Kelly. Right, so Lizzie, I'm going to start with you. Liz Truss's budget, or mini-budget, or...
Mega.
No, it was like a fiscal event. It was like a party.
I watched this budget live and I remember just sitting there, my mouth getting bigger, more wide open, going, there is nothing mini about this budget.
No.
There is nothing mini about it. But I do feel she needs the opportunity to see if this can succeed. I mean, this is all about culture changing. This is about encouraging people going back to work, having more money in your pocket, then thus stimulates the economy. And I explain this to my son. It's like having a cake and you've got to grow this cake, then give each can have a slice of the cake. But, you know, you do need a cake to begin with.
And it used to be a very big cake because I can see Daddy's on it without thinking about cake.
Yeah,
he's on it.
but she needs to hold her ground, keep her nerves. You know, be like Margaret Thatcher. The lady is not for turning. She needs to just keep strong.
Do you know, I'm sick of the parallels with Margaret Thatcher. I think they're overdoing it, I really do. I'm a business owner away from being a journalist and a broadcaster. And the last thing, I can see you now.
Nobody got a title on.
But making small businesses grow. I tell you, I'm a used car dealer. The used car market, retail has just collapsed. And the reason that retail has collapsed is that people are now thinking about whether they have the luxury to afford a new car, or in my case, a used car. Are they going to keep their old car and run it into the ground? And that's what they are doing. People are worried about mortgages, the inflation, about the affordability. And I've got to say, the 45 pence to 40 pence reduction in order to entice the best brains from around the world to be bankers in London, OK, that's just a minute percentage of the people who earn over £150,000. You've got professional footballers paying less tax. You've got broadcasters, TV stars paying less tax. Gary Lineker paying less tax. Why is that fair?
Well, no, I think the reasoning being, and it has been done for before, because, of course, Mrs Thatcher brought it down, I think it was from 80 to 60 or 60 to, you know, and so on and so forth. It was 83% at one point. And the reason why they noticed that what happens every time you sort of reduce that higher end, it actually increases the tax take. And the main reason for that is that a lot of these people don't then try and sift off their money into different sort of tax avoidance schemes, which is what actually happens. So it might sound great, or you're going to tax somebody 45% instead of 40% or vice versa. But as soon as you increase that tax to them, they will find lots of ways of slightly avoiding paying it, because there are lots of legal loopholes that people can use, and that is why. But when you give them an amount that seems OK, then in the end it would appear that that works. And so far, every time they've reduced that higher end, it has increased the tax take. So that's why they're doing it. They want to, instead of penalising for people for being successful, they just want to say OK, because ultimately those people pay the largest amount of tax.
That's right, 30%.
But you want people to be aspirational. You know, and succeed. And why, you know, if you're wealthy, you then can bring on other wealth and look after the infrastructure, look after your employers. But it's over 42% will not be paying tax because they don't earn over 12,570. So, you know, we've got to. She had to do something radical. OK, it's a gamble. OK, it's an economic gamble. It's a political gamble. It's a government gamble because they've got a general election in 18 months' time. But they had to do something, and I agree it's the right thing to do.
The reaction from the banks and the building societies with the mortgage rates, that is a negative reaction for anyone in small business. Now, it doesn't have to be used cars. It can be, a car wash, for example. I know this may sound frivolous, but it's not. Where I get my cars valeted, the fella had said since that budget, he's seen a big, massive 50% reduction, because people are now thinking, well, can I afford, in their case, £10 for an exterior car wash every week? And the answer is no. And Lizzie, I genuinely believe it trickles down to lots of things in our lives. And people now, instead of going to shop at Marks and Spencer's, for example, they're now going to shop somewhere cheaper because people are worried about the future.
Well, I think to be honest, though, I think with the car market, there are other factors at play. So, for example, if we talk about the car market, you're looking at whether people are going to buy an electric car. That's probably one of the reasons. But, Lizzie...
There's so much money. I mean, and can I just say, someone that lives in a rural area, where's the charging point? I mean,
don't even get me started. Don't even get me started with that. But let's find out what the viewers think, because the show's nothing without them. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. And today, I'm joined by four of them. Let's start with Julie Ford, who is joining us from Bedfordshire. Julie, what do you think about this? Liz Truss's vision. Do you think it'll work?
Hi, Nana. Yeah, I think it will work, but the main problem we have is the timeline for it. I think we live in a society where everything is so instant, and we wanted her to bring a budget that would, be brought in on a Monday, and by Tuesday, all of our financial problems would have been resolved. And that's not going to happen. Realistically, she's only got about 18 months before the next election to make anything really substantial. But really, something like this, I think, probably needed 5 years to actually show, by the time all the changes were made, what the real issues were going to be. And I think the fact that we've heard headlines talking about, this is a gamble, this is a disaster, we haven't actually seen any real outcome yet. It only happened a few days ago. And I think realistically...
Well, they're already trying to get rid of her. They're already talking about that, which I'm sorry, I'm not up for it. Not another election, a general election. Let's see if it's going to work. Let's go to, have a chat to Lee Harris. Let's go to Bridlington next. Lee, your view, your thoughts.
Hey, Bristol. We're in Bristol.
Oh, somebody's put Bridlington there. Heads will roll. I'm not happy with that. I'll speak to somebody.
We love Bristol.
I'm the owner of a small business. And I'm nervously optimistic, if I'm brutally honest, about what this plan could deliver. It's the biggest set of tax cuts in half a century. And for the first time in a while, we finally have a bold, ambitious, pro-growth, pro-enterprise Conservative government. And I am pleased about that. But there is no doubt it is a bit of a gamble. But if it works, we will all be better off. And I'm willing to give them a chance. But as we saw with Boris, Liz and Kwasi are under heavy attack from an MSN that is clearly addicted to catastrophising the news pretty much all the time. But I think they need to stick with it. And there's 2 years to a general election, and a huge amount can happen in 2 years. However, there is no denying the communication hasn't been great, and the delivery definitely has been a bit rushed. And for example, although I understand the logic, I agree with what Ben Habib was saying earlier about the 45% tax rate. I understand the logic, but it's a really, really hard sell, and I'm not sure now or this early would have been the right time. But will it work? Yes, I think worst case scenario is the very worst case scenario is that it will stop us going to a recession, and the best case scenario is that we have a modest amount of growth, possibly even bucking a global trend of sluggish or negative growth, and we'll be better off.
Wouldn't it? That would be great. But she just needs the time to get it done. Right, where should we go to next? Let's go to Kidderminster. Let's go to John Reid. John in Kidderminster. John.
Yes, hello, Nana. It's good to see you. Will PM Truss's vision reverse the UK's economic fortunes? There's more chance of snowballs in hell than that happening. I tell you, I'm with Danny 101% on this. You know, they've had 12 years to get the economy right, haven't they? And where are we? We've got longer queues at the food bank. We've got an NHS that's turning on its tail. We've got the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, people talking about having to have 2 or 3 jobs, old age pensioners that are going to say, shall I eat or shall I heat? What shall I do? This is absolutely ludicrous. And I have no faith whatsoever in the Tory government. And I don't think I wouldn't give her 18 months. I wouldn't give her 18 minutes. I would go for a general election tomorrow and let the country talk. Because honestly, why is she there?
Yeah, but you're talking about but you're saying you wouldn't give her 2 months, you give her 2 minutes. But then you know how long it takes them to set up a general election. I don't think I've got the stomach for it. John, thank you. Let's go to Gareth Wyn-Jones. He's there in Wales. Gareth, what do you think?
Good afternoon. Well, I just want to say that I've signed a letter that's been sent by Jeremy Clarkson to our new Prime Minister with the problems with red tape. But again, you know, it's really frustrating. I've been talking to one of my friends this afternoon who is a cafe owner. He's now cutting down to 3 days a week because he can't afford the energy bills, you know, the hike in the food prices, and he just cannot run his business. We have just got to start thinking about the small businesses that are running, you know, what Danny was saying about the car washes. You know, I know it doesn't sound a lot, but these little businesses are part of our economy. And if we don't watch after them, they'll fizzle out. We have to be more positive going forward. And I think, maybe Liz has brought a few things in, but I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough because every single one of these politicians are just so far away from reality. They don't know that people are working two jobs. They're worried about their mortgages.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Gareth, because we've got to go to the Tory party conference. But I'd say thank you very much, Gareth Wyn-Jones. He's there in Wales. Thank you to Julian Beveridge, Lee in Bristol, John Reid in Kidderminster, and of course Gareth Wyn-Jones there in Snowdonia. He was spot on. Now, let's go live to the Tory party conference where Ben Wallace, he'll be live very shortly. We will come back to that as soon as he is available. Right, but now it's time for World View, and today we have an exclusive interview on our show. So first, let's go for our first stop. Let's head to Moscow, to Russia. So thousands of Russian protesters have taken to the streets to demonstrate against the government's mobilisation of men. Now, this is the country's first draft since the Second World War and has caused unprecedented chaos and outrage across the whole of Russia. Since Putin's announcements, the reality of war has finally hit home with ordinary Russian people. And meanwhile, Moscow has said that the mobilisation would aid in Russia's attempt at unifying territories it holds in Ukraine. And those protesting against the war, protesting against it, face 5 years of imprisonment in accordance with the war. I spoke to one of those protesters who was brave enough to risk her life in Moscow to stand up to the Kremlin.
I wouldn't want to be tortured or raped or put in jail. But I'm not afraid of this. They punish anti-war protesters very severely.
Tell us a bit about what happened to you during the protests.
I was really upset about mobilization, although it had been expected. I went to protest that evening. We all linked each other arm in arm. In Russia, we try not to touch police because they can put you in prison for 5 years. So we tried not to put our hands on them, but also not allow each other to be arrested. My arrest was really rough. I fell a few times. 4 of them carried me away because I tried to resist. I don't remember if they beat me or not in detention. I remember that I screamed and that they closed my mouth. But when I came home, I found bruises all over my body. When we arrived at the station, they immediately took away our phones and gave the men their military draft summons to report to the Army Recruitment Centre. They gave the men their papers to report there, and if the government decides, they can be sent to war.
Are you scared for your safety?
People are really scared to protest because the police have to jail a certain number of people every time. It's frightening for people because the state monitors and carries out surveillance on those who are anti-war. For public dissemination of false information, you can be jailed for 5 years. And for discrediting the Russian army, you can be jailed for 15. People are very scared to say anything due to the fear of prison. They will jail someone certainly, but we can't be sure who, because it's like a public execution, to show others what can happen if you step out of line.
What's the mood like in Russia now?
Every day and even today, I hear conversations of everyday people in the street and on buses about mobilization, about the annexation of Ukrainian territory by Russia. Propaganda isn't coping. In Russia, propaganda is very strong. Those older than 40 get their information from the TV, where there is no freedom, just propaganda. There's no information. The government suffocates all media that opposes them. Young people who use the internet understand what's going on. Practically all of them are against the war. But the thing is, there is no democracy. We cannot choose a new government. Our election system doesn't work. There's just a facade of elections, but there are none. It doesn't exist in Russia. Orwell wrote 1984 about the Soviet Union, but we're in it again. We have no freedom. We can't decide anything.
That was Paulina Chistova. She's a student and an activist who risked her life to protest against mobilisation in Russia. I spoke to her just yesterday. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined by political commentator Danny Armstrong, who also worked as a journalist in Russia. So, Danny, I mean, talk me through this. A lot of people are actually trying to get out of Russia now, and there are, as Paulina said, there's a lot of young people who are really protesting against the war. So there's a real energy against this war, but it's the elder generation who seem to be all for it.
Of course, young people are leaving Russia in their tens of thousands. I think more than 100,000 have crossed the border into Kazakhstan. I think around the same number into Georgia, and of course you have to factor in the countries also to the west of Russia. They're trying to escape. Of course, some go to protests. These protests are arrested, put in the back of a police van, and then served their draft summons. They're leaving to escape that, but also to escape the pressure from the older generation. There have been reports, people that I've personally spoke to, who have said that their parents have encouraged them to actually answer the draft summons. People who have actually left the country, they said, come back, fill in your obligation to your country, go to the commissariat, the recruitment centre, and go to the front line. I mean, this is what they're trying to escape in Russia. Hopefully it goes some way to showing people in the West that there is a huge population out there in Russia that are against this war. They've been against it since February 24th, even before that, when there were murmurs of an invasion. And they have carried that right the way through to mobilisation and the annexation of the 4 regions in Ukraine.
What's your general thoughts then on how this war will sort of go, in your view? Do you think it's something that may end up ending quite soon, or do you feel that this is a long graft?
I don't really think the end is in sight anytime soon. I would go as far to say is that Vladimir Putin has backed himself into a corner somewhat. It can't really be understated, the lack of support he's had from even Eastern allies. Of course, we've seen Western condemnation for the war, annexation and mobilisation was expected, but there are countries like India, China and Turkey that have also condemned it. So it's very significant. He's painted himself into a corner internationally.
Well, that's worrying. Danny, thank you very much for joining me. That's Danny Armstrong. He's a political commentator. Right, now let's head over to the United States to find out about the US reaction to all the events taking place in Russia. I'm now joined by the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudderidge. Paul, so what's the reaction to the mobilisation for the Americans? Are the Americans aware of what's going on? A lot of the time, it seems the American people aren't really engaged in what's going on with this war. Are they actually interested in what's happening?
They're certainly interested up to a point. America has got a history of feeling like it's been dragged into European wars, and there's a lot of resentment towards that, to just be taken for granted. This is the people I'm talking about. And it's interesting, there was a poll released, reported in Newsweek just yesterday, that says that 57% of likely voters actually want any aid and assistance to Ukraine tied to a diplomatic approach. And that doesn't fit with Washington's current approach, which is purely military and doesn't engage any idea of diplomacy or agreements. These 57% are in this recent poll are saying that the aid, $16 billion so far, another billion this week has been given to Ukraine, that Ukraine should actually make compromise. Now, that's completely at odds with what's coming out of Washington. So we're beginning to see fractures and splits, if you like, in the consensus in the United States.
Do you think that NATO are likely to intervene?
Yes, in short, I think they're going to. I think that Washington, basically Washington is a proxy for NATO and vice versa. And as long as this administration is keen on a military resolution, and solely a military resolution, then NATO has to be involved. I can't see how that's going to be avoidable.
If it does escalate in that way, how do you think the US will react?
Well, former Vice President Joe Biden this week has made it very clear that after Putin's more, the extended saber rattling and invoking nuclear, former Vice President Biden has made it very clear that it will be matched and met with commensurate force. So I think that the word out of Washington and the word from the administration, there really is no doubt at all that it will be met militarily. And so Americans, the average American knows that they will be used for boots on the ground at some point, or feels that. And again, that's just me, that's my sort of local horse sense about talking to actual Americans. But it actually seems to be the strategy coming out of Washington, that this thing is being amped up. It's not the fault of Washington, it's their response to it. Does not include diplomacy at this point. And that can only mean, I believe, a military outcome.
Well, listen, Paul, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, as ever. That's Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast. So on today's show, we've been asking, will Prime Minister Liz Truss's vision reverse the UK's economic fortunes? And according to our Twitter poll, 65% of you say yes. 65%, that's a good show, isn't it? 35% of you say no. I'm going to say a big thank you to my panel, the fabulous Lizzie Cundy, who's a columnist, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, for joining me today. And a big thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back next Friday at 4 to discuss those top stories. I'll see you then.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Conservative Party conference is underway in Birmingham.